Matt, I'm off the cost. Nice to meet you. How's things?
Good. Done with the whole campaign thing.
What's that?
About done with this whole
Yeah.
campaign thing.
Yeah, the first time's the worst. It gets,
Yeah, this is all this time.
it is. It's a lot, you know.
I've done it. You think you put in more hours or less hours?
This campaign?
Well, not this one. The first campaign. I feel like I'm putting in 2 jobs here. Just for
Well, wait, if you get elected, then you really realize what 2 jobs is, because this job is 25 to 30 hours a week. That's the reality. To do it right,
Yeah.
you know, to understand what you're talking about and get the both sides of it, you really have to put the time. The good part of it is most of it is either reading or internet research, so you can find time. If you're good at juggling time or really, using the best of your time. Get a good iPad with Wi-Fi and I do in the summertime when I'm fishing. I do 90% of my research between Great Point and the jetties, back and forth. You know, I've got 20 minutes each way there where I give them 8 to wheel and I read and keep caught up. But I joke in the last 3 years, the only thing that I haven't read a book in 3 years. The only thing I read now is this Town of Nantucket. Clifford, how was school? Was it warm at least?
No, it was like 30.
Was it?
It was painful.
Did you guys come to the meet the candidates with the town? Were there many people here?
No, because there was no food or booze.
I called them several times and I said, look, I'll be more than happy to come, but it's just not going to look good. And I knew that the paper would crucify us if we had done it. So.
Hello.
It was mostly.
I don't know why they wouldn't open
No, I
it
don't.
just up to the public. You don't have to. The public doesn't have to ask questions. You can say this is for town employees only. But what are you trying to hide? I mean,
Well, they let the choir mayor come, so.
they did that night.
Yeah.
Well, if they'd told us that, we would have come.
Yeah. Who's there? People. Yeah, there was a choir mayor.
So the inquiry mayor was at the union thing.
Well, it's a good thing.
But if we'd known that, we would have come.
Yeah, but it
That
is
was
what
the
it
whole
is.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kim was there.
That makes no sense.
Probably was there because of what we did, Bobby.
Yeah, maybe. I would have come if I'd known
Okay.
that.
You have a lot of flexibility. They have time.
Thank you.
Sure.
Give them the mic so you can. Actually, why don't you just.
Come around so I can face the audience. Good afternoon and welcome to the Nantucket Civic League's Meet the Candidates program. I'm Alan Reinhardt, president of the Nantucket Civic League. Now, the Civic League, as you probably know, is the umbrella organization for 22 different area associations, and we represent approximately 2,200 members throughout the island. We have area associations all the way from Wauwinet out to Smiths Point and everywhere in between. Now, part of the Civic League's mission is to promote informed citizen participation in local government. And we do this through our programs, through Meet the Articles 2 weeks ago, Meet the Candidates, and the various forums that we present through the course of the year. The purpose of this afternoon's program is to give the candidates running for office an opportunity to introduce themselves and state their qualifications for office and to make a case for why they should be elected. The program will be broadcast on NCTV 18 and on Geno TV, Channel 99. And without further ado, Peter Morrison from the Executive Board of the Civic League will be our moderator this afternoon. Peter?
Thank you, Alan, and welcome all of you today. I'm going to be your moderator, and today's program, as Alan said, is designed to inform you who've attended and also many more voters who can view subsequent rebroadcasts on Channel 18 and Channel 99. You're going to hear from 4 candidates who are running for 2 seats for Board of Selectmen, and then from 3 candidates who are running for a single seat on the Land Bank. And finally, we've invited the HDC's new non-incumbent members to introduce themselves to you, and we have one such individual who has agreed to appear at the end for 2 minutes or so. A little bit about how the time is going to go. We've allocated 2 minutes for each candidate to present their qualifications for office and their positions on issues. Then we will have questions from our 2 panelists to which each candidate will be invited to respond. And following that, I'll ask candidates to respond to written questions from you in the audience, to which the candidates will respond. And I'd ask that you submit your questions in writing on a card. And to do so, you just raise your hand at any time, and our volunteers who are situated around the room will provide you with a pen and a card, and then they will deliver the questions to the moderator. And at the end, we'll ask each candidate to make a very brief closing statement. We are going to have Pat Newton act as our timekeeper today. Pat is at the end of the table, following a long tradition. Pat will ring our venerated bell to signal each candidate when their allotted time is up. Just by way of background, a little history, this bell belonged to Jane Lamb, who was our timekeeper for many years and was fondly known as the unofficial mayor of Wauwinet. Jane used this very bell in her kindergarten class in the 1950s, and we keep it in service to honor the Civic League's tradition of service. It's a distinctive ring, and it is both polite and, I think, persuasive. So first, let me introduce our 2 panelists who will be questioning the candidates. Seated on your far left is Dan Drake, host of Front Up on Geno TV's Channel 99. And next to him, we have Elise Linscott with the Enquirer and Mirror. So we're going to begin with our 4 candidates for Board of Selectmen who are seated on the stage. And I'll ask each of you to limit your opening statements to 2 minutes. And we'll start in alphabetical order with Rick Atherton. Rick?
Thanks, Peter. Turn the button on, just like Wednesday night. Thanks, Peter. And to the Civic League, and welcome those who are here and who are going to watch it either subsequently on either Geno or Channel 18. My name's Rick Atherton. You know, sometimes you think you know everybody on the island, but I know I don't. So I do want to introduce myself. Our family has been coming to Nantucket since we first vacationed here in 1972. We've been year-round residents for the longest period in our life that we've lived anywhere. That's from 1991 on. I've had the good fortune to have the time available since we moved to Nantucket to be involved in civic affairs, a number of nonprofit organizations and the Civic League itself. Just purely by chance, I applied to join the town's finance committee early on, was appointed by the board who didn't have a clue, quite frankly, who I was. And I have enjoyed participating in that regard for many years, and I've had 2 terms as a member of the Board of Selectmen. I think I've shown that I'm knowledgeable about the issues. I try very hard to be fair and deliberative and be sure that our decision-making is information-based. I think those attributes can carry forward. I think there are a lot of issues the town continues to face. It's faced a number of them for many years. And I think my, again, experience will stand me well in seeking your vote for re-election as a member of the Board of Selectmen. One other sort of comment, there's a real sort of history involved with Nantucket, and I feel a certain pride no matter what happens in the election that I've been able to serve. There's a long history as an island. We all love the island. No matter how we feel on some issues, I think we all recognize there are going to be differences, but it's a place we love and want to respect. Thank you.
Okay, next we'll hear from Bob DeCosta.
Thank you. My name is
turn the mic on. My name is Bob DaCosta. I am seeking a second term for the Board of Selectmen. I was elected 3 years ago. I am a year-round Nantucket, not a native. I was not born here, but I've been here since I was 6 weeks old, and that's considered important to specify, so I am open about that. But I've been here my whole life. Nantucket is my home. It will continue to be my home. My family started the Albacore charter fishing business in 1968. We're the oldest charter fishing business on Nantucket. I took it over 20 years ago when my father passed away. I am a business owner in Nantucket. I fish in the summer. I do construction in the winter. I decided to run for the Board of Selectmen 3 years ago because I felt that I had tried to help fix things from the outside and felt like I couldn't get things done, and it was time to stand up and put the time in. And I had no idea what the time meant until I got into this office. And it's an immense amount of time, but it's time that I enjoy. You know, on average, I probably work 20 to 30 hours a week on this. There's a lot of research and time that go into this to really understand both sides of a subject. That's one of the things I pride myself on, is I try to really get a full picture of it, pro and con, and then I make a decision, and I stand by that decision. And if there's one thing that I try to bring to the board, it's common sense, and to get rid of a lot of the fluff that sometimes occurs with events and different things. So I've enjoyed my time. I'd like to do one more term because I have some projects that I haven't finished, and I'd like to see them through. And if I'm fortunate enough to get elected again, I can tell you right now that this will be my last term, 2 and done. So, thank you.
Adam, you're up next. Adam
Great.
Reed.
Thank you to the Civic League for hosting this forum and your continued dedication to citizen engagement. About 2 years ago, I left a very lucrative and stable career to pursue a life of service, something I continue to do here on Nantucket. I am well educated. I have plenty of experience with business, politics, and government, but what I think really qualifies me to be a selectman is my commitment and passion to this community. The reason I'm running now is because since I was a kid, I've seen the continual diminishment of our local community. More people being pushed off island due to increased prices and unreliable housing, the loss of artists, craftsmen, and the local small businesses to make way for streamlined formula businesses that offer nothing for their long-term stability or community development. Also the lack of engagement and the loss of a cohesive community voice. This is a path I think we've been drawn down by our leaders, often with good intentions, but I think it's time to change course. A leader isn't just someone who listens to the facts and makes decisions. A leader is someone who will get out there and fight for this community, who won't just agree to progress, but who will implement progress. As a selectman, I will not always have the answers, but it will be my job to find them for you. I won't always agree with you, but I will always be there and I'll always listen. And I can promise you that any good idea for this community will not be dismissed. And it'll be my purpose to find a common thread between our different opinions, beliefs, and concerns, and then find a way for them to work for this community. I'm not here for the beautiful beaches or the amazing food or the wonderful shops. I'm here because this is where my people are, this is where my community is, and I love Nantucket. And without the local community, I believe that Nantucket has no soul. So for more detailed information, vote adamreed.com.
Excellent timing.
Thank you.
Finally, we'll hear from Clifford Williams.
Hi, I'm Clifford Williams. I was born and raised in Nantucket. My family's been here for, 350 years, I guess, since the beginning. Once I graduated from high school in 1981, I left for about 20 years. I worked for some of the biggest defense contractors, Petroleum Helicopters, United Airlines, General Dynamics. I worked in California, Boston, so I think I've got a lot of experience as far as unions, non-unions, corporations, living outside of Nantucket, and then the experience of being here in Nantucket. I've worked for the FAA at the airport for the last 13 years. I ran for selectman, 4 years ago for the first time, when I became discouraged with how the way things were being run at the airport. We mulled through that and hopefully things are in the right direction. Also, since then, I've been able to be on the Finance Committee for the last 4 years, and I believe those experiences with the town budget and different other organizations and committees I've been on qualify me for the Board of Selectmen. And hopefully I'll get your vote.
Very good. We're right on schedule, and we're going to now have some questions from our two panelists. And I think maybe the best way to do this is just rotate we'll start with you, Dan, and then Elise, and then back to Dan and Elise. And in each case, we're going to have a question, and then we'd like each candidate to offer a response no more than 1 minute. And there will be an opportunity for follow-up questions optionally by the questioners. Okay, so Dan, you're first.
Thank you, Peter. Very simply, what is the most pressing issue facing the town now in your view, and how would you propose to address it?
Want to start alphabetically, Rick?
Sure. Well, I think I'm not sure there's ever only one issue, Dan, but I think overall, if you wanted to try and encapsulate an issue, I think keeping Nantucket, and what I mean by that is our water quality, dealing with our open spaces, our beaches, our historic architecture. I think those are the overriding elements that make Nantucket attractive. They're key economic drivers to bring tourists and second homeowners and enable the rest of us who live here year-round to continue to enjoy the island we love. So the Board of Selectmen, I think, has to sort of have an enhanced role in thinking about those important items. Thank you.
Bob, do you want to go next?
Yeah, for me, it's water quality. It's all about clean harbors, ponds, creeks. One of the reasons that I wanted to run again was to see the comprehensive wastewater management plan through to its end, and the sewering of the areas that need to be sewered, storm drain improvements, things of that nature. It's one of those things that even if you fix it tomorrow, it takes quite a bit of time before you start to see an improvement. And the same can be said about the deterioration. You may not see the deterioration now of what's happening, but if you don't fix it, you will in a few years. And then by the time you see it, it's too late. So, we have one of the last scallop industries in the country. It's one of the only winter industries that isn't involve building, and at some point the building's going to disappear here, so I think we need to continue with our water quality issues.
Yeah, it is hard to pick just one issue. For me, big picture, it's the loss of the local community, and I think the most pressing issue for us right now is the lack of housing and what the town's going to do about creating affordable housing. I know across the street, we have a lot of buildable lots that we've had for almost 10 years that were purchased with the intent of building affordable housing, and yet we've done nothing about it. We've built this beautiful $18 million police station, but we still have no affordable housing. And I think the way the town can do it is by creating town-owned affordable rentals that will be managed through a local partnership with developers and builders here on the island. Yeah, housing, that's the big one. Water quality is important too, though.
I'd echo the same things, the water quality, but I think we've got a good handle on that. I think we've, as you talk to other towns, by sewering the town 100 years ago, we obviously one-upped everybody. Right now we're facing, as Adam says, the population, affordable housing on Nantucket. Whether you work at Cumberland Farms or you work for the town of Nantucket, I think in the next 10, 15, 20 years, as individuals probably retire from Nantucket that might already have housing, how do we attract new employees or new residents to the town of Nantucket? How they can afford to live here? It's a big problem, and like I said, the school system, the population's exploded up there. It's just a broad range of issues. I don't think there's one.
Before I turn to Elise, Dan, do you have any follow-up questions on this one?
I'll hold it till my
Okay,
next
all
turn.
right. Elise, you're up.
All right. What role, if any, should the Board of Selectmen play in proposing or entering partnerships with private organizations for projects that impact both public and private land?
Rick?
You can start at the same spot or
Yeah.
rotate?
I think we start
I
with
think
Bobby,
we
yeah.
start- we start-
Good idea,
usually-
start with Bobby.
Usually we rotate
All right.
the first guy, question by question.
I'm still in the learning mode, so
That's
Bobby.
all right,
I'm
we'll help
first,
you
then,
out.
okay.
Yeah, can you repeat the question again first? What was the question?
What role, if any, should the Board of Selectmen play in proposing or entering partnerships with private organizations for projects that impact both public and private land?
Well, I think it's a very important role for the town, and it's one of those things where you've got to think outside the box to fix the box. And, you know, in housing, for example, where Adam talked about, if you build affordable housing and you use state or HUD money, the majority of the people that live here that need the housing don't qualify for it. So it really doesn't work that way. So but you've had some type of private partnership where private developer built it with conjunction with the town, where it could really go to who needs the housing, which is the people that live here year-round. And I'm not talking about the lower class, I'm talking about the middle class. What we consider middle class here do not qualify for housing, for affordable housing under state and federal guidelines. So, and that's what we're losing here. We're not losing our lower class, if we even really have a lower class here, but we're losing our middle class workforce. The other is in erosion control. There's a lot of places besides the bluff at Sankaty where we're going to have erosion control problems in the next 10 years, and private partnerships are the only way to fix it.
For me, I think it depends on what type of public-private partnership we're talking about. When we were talking about combining visitor services with the Chamber of Commerce, I didn't support that sort of private partnership. But when we're talking about the housing, and I agree with Bob on this one, the way to do it would be to partner with local businesses. I think it's important to stay local, though. So just any sort of private partnership doesn't work. Private partnerships with local businesses, small local businesses, is a good thing. And if we're talking about building housing, then yes, partnering with local developers who can manage and build these houses and then profit along with the town and the people of Nantucket, that would be the best way to go. So yes sometimes, no sometimes.
Obviously, if we're involved, we have to be involved if we have assets involved and the liability that goes with it. Sherman Commons is probably a great example of how we leased the land and things deteriorated from there, and maybe we should have more input into that whole operation from the beginning, and what the pitfalls are, what the positives and minuses are, so that those things don't happen again.
And finally, Rick?
Yeah, I think we do have two examples right off the bat where we've had public-private partnerships where the use of town-owned property has been involved. One is Sherburne Commons. The other is the Hunting Association. In both cases, there was really a fairly active dialogue with town meeting about how those arrangements would work. Both arrangements went to town meeting. The property was owned by the citizens of Nantucket, and in both cases, town meeting had an opportunity to vote on the leases, which were arranged for the use of the property by private entities. So I think those are good examples of how public-private partnerships can develop a broad base of support and receive approval or not by the owners of the property.
Elise, do you have any follow-up questions at this point?
No, I do not.
Okay, Dan, next question from you.
I was gonna ask a question about rental housing. A couple of you have already addressed that, but I think it's relevant to another question, which is that very often the government, mostly the government here, seems to be reactive rather than proactive. And it's when the waves are lapping at the foot of the bluff, or when the state is threatening us with penalties or something, that we finally respond. So my question really is, lack of leadership an issue in the governance of Nantucket? And if you agree that it is there any solution to it, or is it a structural problem of the way the government is set up?
We'll start with you, Adam, on the response.
Well, there's always institutional problems with systems in our government. but I do think our leaders could do a better job of being proactive in getting out there and engaging people. I lost my train of thought. I forgot.
Is it a structure, is it possible
Oh.
for there to be greater leadership, or is it a structural issue?
Yes, it is possible for there to be better leadership by engaging citizens, and I think Selectmen, I like what Tobias does, where he offers the office hours. I think being accessible to citizens and being proactive, not just, like I said in my beginning speech, to not just make decisions and listen to facts, but to get out there and fight for things, to get out there and push things and support things, and inform the people.
Cliff, your response?
I do believe, I think that theory of structural is probably more prevalent than leadership as a result of us being at the bottom rung of government. You know, the federal government, we've probably discussed it before, the federal government does what they want, the state government tries to do what they want, and then we're told what to do. So, you know, as a selectman, you know, we don't just go out there and run the town the way we want to. We're held by the Department of Revenue and their restrictions. So I think we do the best we can, and probably with less restrictions. It's a positive and a negative to that. So.
You know, interesting, I think leadership comes when you're on a board. It takes 5 people. It takes 3 to govern on any particular issue. So leadership has to do with advocating for the positions you think are important. The one I think of over time that was really started with citizens, and often ideas do start with citizens, was the whole question of fertilizer. And you go back to the town meeting, and the board, with some leadership, I think, made sure we had a committee that represented all the interested parties and stakeholders. And that process, the Article 68 committee, enabled the community as a whole to come to a recommendation and a solution to move forward with fertilizer regulation, which could be accomplished locally. It did not take a state to step in, and we found a way to do it. So that's an example where the board can facilitate and help bring issues forward and come to, I think, proper leadership conclusions.
Bob?
Well, I'm going to take a little bit of different tact here. I don't think sitting in an office for a couple hours a week and putting a quote on the board fixes problems. My phone number is out there in the public, and my email's out there, and anyone in the public can contact me any time of the day or night, and I always get back to them, or I answer the phone at that point. The reality with this job is that this takes an immense amount of time above the Wednesday night meetings, probably on average 20 to 25 hours a week of subcommittee meetings, phone calls, research, and there's always priorities that come to the top that we have to deal with right away. There seems like we spend 3/4 of our time being firemen and putting out fires. That's just the reality of being a selectman. It's really easy to sit here and go, well, we need to have a long-term plan, and we do, and we work on that constantly. But at the same time, we have to deal with issues that arise on a constant basis. So I think that the Board of Selectmen as a whole do a great job, and I think that what Rick said about 3 members voting to have the majority is just the way our government's set up.
Dan, do you have any follow-up
I
questions?
do actually have a follow-up. My follow-up question is, could the town manager play a greater role in providing leadership on some of these issues? The town, not the individual, the job.
And I think you're up, Cliff.
Well, thanks. You know, the town of Nantucket, it's pretty diverse, and it gives the town administration a great deal of responsibility. I've lived in small towns in New Hampshire where the biggest thing is the school and the fire department. There's no water department, there's no marine department, there's no airport. So I think, I guess as far as leadership, I guess they're doing the best they can do right now. I think it's, as a selectman, and as Bobby said, you know, the whole community needs to get involved. You can only surround yourself by good people, and I think in Nantucket we're lucky to have a great deal of educated and people that have worked in different industries and come to retire here. So I think it's probably the whole community it's just like town meeting that could help. Town administration, I don't know, I just think they're doing the best they can do right now.
It's interesting, the charter really gives the town manager significant responsibility and direct control over most of the management issues of our staff providing services. So I think there's already a structure that allows the town manager to be as active as the town manager feels is appropriate. You know, sitting on a board and the way our structure works, I tend to be a little bit, I accept that we have a form of democracy which comes from town meeting to the Board of Selectmen through the voters, and we hire the town manager, and the town manager is the administrator. The town manager does have a difficult task in trying to decide when to act independently of the board and when to bring issues to the board. And you have to watch how the individual holding that job accepts that responsibility. There's a corollary to the board making sure we communicate with the town manager what the priorities ought to be.
I'm going to follow up where Rick left off, and the fact that the town manager does have to report to the Board of Selectmen and therefore the voters. And the board changes every year. And the realities of what the board's important missions are change every year. And I think the town manager and the town administration do a great job of dealing with that change along with the daily obligations that they have with running all these different departments and negotiating with contracts and dealing with town employees and the general public at large and everything that we have. I mean, you know, as Clifford said, we're not a small little sleepy town in Vermont that has 4,000 people in it living year-round. We're a town that's now somewhere between 10 and 12,000 estimated on a year-round basis that jumps to almost 50, 60,000 in the summer. And we have the Island Home, and we have the airport, and we have the water company. We have 3 enterprise accounts, as well as the landfill that a lot of towns don't have. So we're a pretty big corporation.
And Adam?
I think that everyone in the town, town manager, town employees, the selectmen, there's always more we can do. There's always ways we can do it better. I wouldn't wish any more work for Libby. It's a tough job. It's a long job, I'm sure. But I think it will be our role and our job as selectmen to help guide her or whoever is town manager down that path and to do things better and to do things that are more effective for the community. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, we've got time, about 5 more minutes for one more round of questions, and I'm going to ask Elise to ask a question, and each of you to respond. Then we'll go on to the audience questions.
Should the town consider a shift to merit-based pay structure for municipal employees? And if so, how could such a change be implemented? And if not, why not?
And we'll start with you, Rick.
Yeah, this is a subject that's come up often over the years. One of the most difficult parts of a selectman's job, and through us to the town manager, is negotiating contracts with our staff. I mean, let's be open about that. It's partly pay and the benefit structure, but also it's the sort of environment in which they operate. And I think merit pay, for example, is one that is difficult to implement. I think most citizens would feel that it's appropriate to implement. Even such basic questions as appraisals of performance reviews on an annual basis for staff members are difficult in this environment. I just want to be open about that. The board is actively trying to encourage a better sort of salary administrative structure in order to reward performance, but it's very difficult to get specific outcomes without the negotiation process.
Bob?
I believe merit pay is the only way that we should be rewarding our employees. I don't believe anyone in this world should get rewarded for just being at a job. That's the way I was raised. That's the way I've always worked. That's the way it's always worked for me. Do I think that that's a reality in town government with the union contracts that we have? Probably not. But I think that that's what we should have. I don't know if we'll ever get there, but I served 3 years in the military before I came back to Nantucket, and one of the things that was most frustrating to me was I would do my job 10 times better than the guy next to me, but he got the promotion because he had been there 3 months longer than me. And to me, that's just a mistake, and unfortunately, that's the rules that we're playing with the union contracts that we have, and I think it would be very difficult to negotiate that out, but that's where I believe we should be.
Adam?
I know we're waiting for a wage and compensation report, so I'd have to defer to that to make a final answer, but I support anything that's good for the town employees, and whatever is best for the town employees is what I'll support. I do support merit system ideologically, but I would really have to look at all the numbers to say yes or no on that one. But the town employees are the ones who make this town run, and without them, this town would not run, and so whatever is beneficial to them is where I would go with that one. Thank you.
He's right, we're talking about the Wage and Compensation Committee, and I think that's going to be a great achievement, so we can finally have a pay scale where if you're a secretary, you start out at this much, and then you top out at this much. And if you're a truck driver with a CDL license, or you can operate a crane, or whatever it may be, you get paid in a certain range, and that's it. We just don't, because you were an employee for the town for 40 years, you continue to get paid more and more. Or if your boss thinks you should get more pay, you end up making 150 grand, and you're not even an administrative staff member. As far as the merit-based, I work for General Dynamics, and if you could save them money, and you could prove you saved them money, then you got half the money which they saved, say, the first time, whether it was, we launched satellites, so if you, I think they didn't paint the tank on the space shuttle, it was gray or orange, then somebody got half that money. So I think that's the best way to do it.
Very good. We're right on schedule now to begin with the questions from the audience, and I've got quite a few of them here. None of them overlap. So we're going to go with the questions as I've received them in order. And the next person to be first will be Bob DaCosta. And an audience member has asked, would you consider, I'm sorry, this is for the land bank candidates.
We'll take those.
Sorry.
I'll give it a
All right. Last summer, we hit 45 megawatts of power demand in July. How would you address this growing need, and would you consider developing alternative energy such as wind, wave, wind, and tidal energy to avoid a $60 million third cable, which the taxpayers will have to pay for? And we'll start with Bob.
I think energy conservation is the first thing that we can do. We can do that right now. Lauren's done a phenomenal job with home audits, and everyone who's had them reaps the benefits from it. But there's still a lot of homes on the island that haven't had them, especially our summer homes. As far as renewable energies, whether it be wind, tidal, whatever, I'm fine with exploring them, but I am not in favor of voting through one just for the sake of going green. I think they have to make financial sense to the town. And anyone who knows me knows that I was not in favor of the turbine at the landfill. And the reason for that was I crunched the numbers, and the numbers didn't make sense to me. And I don't believe that we should build wind turbines or wave energy or whatever if it's going to cost us more money than it's costing us right now. I am a strong believer, I think, in tidal energy. I think that that's something that we can look at in the future. The technology's not there yet, but I think it will be.
Adam, you're next.
I am 150% in favor of any sort of renewable energy. I believe that it is the future. I believe that we have the technology. I've looked at the numbers as well, and they aren't perfect, but if we're talking about a long-term vision for Nantucket, a long-term plan, then it is affordable. It's not just affordable, it's responsible. It could potentially provide free energy for the town of Nantucket, in addition to creating revenue for the town of Nantucket. And it's green, and I support things that are green. I'm a big fan of renewable energy.
Cliff?
I was obviously on the Finance Committee when all the windmill debate came up, and you were a big part of it. I think your question was, should we have renewable energy to prevent a third cable? The problem with that is when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, and it's a calm day in the ocean, you still need electricity. And if you don't have the grid in place, you're going to have a rolling brownout or whatever it may be. So those things don't, even though they can, I guess, save us from using more energy on certain days or certain situations, it's not going to prevent us from putting the infrastructure in that we need for the needs of the town as we grow.
Rick?
Yeah, it's interesting, the question of alternative energy. We do have Lauren Sinatra and George Aronson, and George is a real pro, and he's been exploring all these options, and when one works, I'm sure it'll come forward, and the Board of Selectmen and the community will support that. In the meantime, in terms of a third cable, I think it should be clear that conservation and lower energy use is the real solution to that. There's a lot more bang for the buck, and everybody knocking off 15% of your energy usage. We can do that now. We don't have to do the other things. If they can come along and work, that's fine. But conservation's the way to avoid a third cable.
Okay, the next question I have from the audience is, what is your position on the potential purchase by the town of the Egan property on Mill Hill? And we'll begin with Adam.
I support any sort of land purchase by the town. I think it's important, since land is a commodity here, obviously, and we do have this housing problem, that any sort of land that we can keep in our possession for the future is going to be beneficial to us down the road. I have some friends that are involved in it, and it seems like a no-brainer. Then there's also the fact that it's a park. There's people that border on it, and it's been in the town for a long time. And so as we move forward, giving up this land, giving up this property is going to come back to bite us in 20 years, and we're going to say, we should have bought that property. So that's my opinion on that one.
Cliff?
I wasn't that involved in it. I know we've been eyeing the property since last year or 2 years ago. I think it might be already sold to someone else, but if that's what we want to do, low-income housing or affordable housing, I should say, that's not my expertise, but I guess the town meeting's probably the best place to decide whether or not we want the property.
Rick?
Yeah, I've been public in terms of my feelings about the use of tax dollars to purchase the Egan property. I think there are other higher priority properties the town can deal with. We have substantial capital requirements coming our way. So it's not a piece that I will vote for in terms of using tax dollars. I recognize that town meeting sometimes feels differently than any of us do as individuals, and town meeting will speak on that issue as it has in the past. But I'm being very frank in my approach that it's not the highest priority.
I voted to put it to town meeting, but I will vote against it. I think it's not a good capital expense for the town, considering the large capital expense we have coming up. I believe that the island's done such a great job saving our open space that we've priced our young people right out of Nantucket. The land bank is great, but the land bank has been the single driving force to drive real estate prices on this island through the roof. Every time a subdivision piece of land came up that would have been probably subdivided into housing units for year-round population, it was purchased by the land bank and drove the real estate prices higher and higher and higher. And we've done such a great job preserving Nantucket that in 50 years there'll be nobody here but the people that can afford the $1 million homes and the workforce that lives in the transient housing. And the American dream is to own your own home and own your own piece of land. And affordable housing is not the solution to that. And so every time one of these chunks comes up that we want to buy just to keep open space, I'm not necessarily in favor of them.
Okay, we're going to start with you first, Cliff, on this one. Understanding that you are only one vote, how would you hope to address the well-publicized needs and concerns of the Sherburne Commons residents, the Our Island home patients, and the elderly who use the undersized Salt Marsh senior center?
I haven't been involved enough with the Sherman Commons other than it seems to be coming up again. And I know there's been different ideas to move Island Home people out there at one time, but I don't think it meets the code for that. Our Island Home needs a lot of work as far as capital improvements. I don't think it's a community. I know when the ACDC, whatever the acronym is, every time an issue comes up for the elderly in Nantucket, I think town meeting usually votes positively for it. So, as I'm not an expert in that field, I think the town has continuously always met the needs of the elderly when challenged.
Rick?
Yeah, Sherburne Commons. We find ourselves in a situation where the owner wants to sell. And I think the Board of Selectmen reacted to that, I think, in a very proper way, tried to talk to the potential buyer and weigh our responsibilities to the taxpayers as the owner of the land and our responsibilities to the residents of Sherburne Commons who went through a very difficult experience before. And I think we've come to a point now where there are a number of possible solutions. One is to possibly set up a new nonprofit so that the Sherburne Commons can exist and the benefits of the real estate there can accrue to Sherburne Commons and its residents. We're not sure that's going to work out yet, but we have some, David Worth has been very helpful in this process in doing the negotiations. We have always felt there's a possibility to move our island home from where it is. It needs substantial repairs and improvements, and Sherburne Commons is a potential location, and it's as a new facility. It's not to use the facility that exists there today. A new facility would meet the code.
Bob?
Well, I think the question was what my one vote could do, and I can tell you that my one vote would not do anything that would have any impact on the residents of Sherburne Commons. I think we're in the driver's seat here. We own the land. The town of Nantucket owns the land, so anyone that comes in there and wants to take that piece over has to make a deal with the town. And the deal that was there with Northbridge was not a good deal for the town or for the residents, despite what the residents were being told. The Northbridge wanted to take the cottages and sell them off and put that money in their pocket, and that's just not right. It's town land, and if anybody should be getting the profit, it should be the residents or the town. Nobody's going to get thrown out on the street as long as the town owns the land. They have to negotiate with us, and as long as I'm here, I'm going to make sure that the best deal possible is for the residents. As far as the Island Home goes, it needs a lot of major upkeep. It needs to either be completely renovated or a new one be built. We're one of the last two towns in the Commonwealth that have town-owned facilities, so I think we should stay with that. Whether the facility stays there or moves somewhere else, we'll have to see, but that's where I'm at with that.
Adam?
Well, Sherburne Commons is a mess, clearly, and it's going to be a while till we can get something straightened out there. But I think it's a good example of a lack of long-term vision and planning by the town, finding us in these messes that are now seemingly impossible to get out of. I think we have opportunities to do those kind of things better now in terms of the Island Home. There is a need for increased services and renovations. From the people I've talked to at the Island Home, though, there's a concern. They love it there, and they love having that waterfront view. And I think the new facility that would cost tons of money would be so large that it wouldn't really be necessary for Nantucket. I think we could better renovate that building. And AC/DC, which is being completely cut, is an issue too that I think we should talk about, if you want to talk about it.
Cliff?
I started, didn't I?
You started.
Yes, I did. I'll do it again, though. I get a better answer this time.
You did start, I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep track here. Okay. We're now going to start with a question that we'll have Rick begin with. And this person says, can you comment on how the public-private arrangement has worked and works now with Waste Options?
Waste options.
Double the time.
I'll try not to go back in history. I've been involved with this contract since the beginning as a member of the Finance Committee. I will say that there have been some changes at Waste Options. I think the organization is, as a partner with the town, is much more responsive today. Thank you for the button. I'll start over. I have a history with Waste Options as a member of the Finance Committee. And as I said, the Waste Options itself has had managerial changes. I think the organization is far more responsive to the needs of the community than it was before. I was not in favor of what we call flow control, so I supported the opportunity for Miles Reese to set up a competing C&D facility. I think the recent amendment to the contract giving Waste Options the ability to approach that part of their responsibility to the town with market-based pricing will benefit all of us in the end. So I think the relationship has improved dramatically recently. So,
Bob?
Well, I was the dissenting vote on this amendment to the contract. I think it's a bad deal for the town, personally. I voted against it. I have no problem with Miles going into the C&D business. I think we're paying Waste Options too much money for what they call C&D. And I think behind the scenes, Waste Options is saying that, well, this money is earmarked for C&D, but it actually goes to other parts of the facility. If that's the case, open your books, show us where the money's going. They don't seem to want to do that. I think I got saddled with a bad contract when I came in here as a selectman, and I wasn't going to make it worse. So that's why I was a dissenting vote on the amendment, in my mind.
Adam?
I'm going to have to agree with Bob on that one. The contract's up in about 7 years, I think. And 7, yeah. And even though that's 7 years away, I think this is something we really need to start talking about now to create a plan for the future. I think the town could do it better, and I think there's opportunities for us to have better services out there and a better dump out there. And like Bob said, I don't think it's a good deal, and I don't like what Waste Management's doing out there, and I think it's time that we take back control over those things.
Cliff?
I was asked as part of the Finance Committee to give a recommendation whether or not to take the contract or not sign the contract. So I had about 3 or 4 days to look it over and look at the numbers and look at the formula, talk to George Aronson. From what he told me and assured me that it's probably a calamity of errors from past administrations we won't talk about. But what it's come down to is they're responsible supposedly for the unlined and lined cells and for disposing of the compost. And so, as Bobby said, those expenses, which we referred to as, say, the $35,000 we give for the building, really isn't $35,000 for the building, because the building hasn't even been there for a year. And there's a handling fee, and that's also really doesn't go for handling. So I think I'm glad the subject finally came up about the landfill, because for the 4 years I've been around, we really don't talk about the landfill. So I've got a great education just in the last month or so, and I think the main thing we need out there is more transparency, and I think they're supposed to open their books under the new contract.
Okay, this next question will begin with you, Bob, and the question is, at town meeting April 5th, Article 90 will ask voters to give new town employees a choice of retirement plans, either the existing plan or a 401k. Where do you stand on this article?
I'm all for it, but I don't know if the unions are going to allow it. One of the biggest things that is going to affect the town in the next 6 years is the increase in retirement and medical benefits. Rick, help me here. I think it's around 18% a year is what we're figuring right now.
yeah, the increases are going to be large, and the unfunded liability,
Right.
Bobby, is just
So if you look
huge.
at our annual budget and you just extrapolate that number out 18% over the next 10 years, and then you look at 2.5%, which is the max that we can raise taxes, the numbers just don't jive. And it's a concern that everyone has in the town, but it's not an easy fix. And, the new employees, taking new employees and putting them on a different retirement system versus the Barnstable retirement might be a way to do it, but I don't know contractually if we're going to be able to do it.
Adam?
Yes. I know there's a lot of concerns from the town employees. I did their forum the other night, and they were not in favor of it. But I think we do need to balance those concerns with the needs of the community and the town as a whole. It's going to put us in a sticky financial situation if we don't switch to something. And my understanding is that it really wouldn't affect current town employees. It would be optional, and the only people it would affect would be the new incoming town employees. So I 100% support Article 90.
Cliff?
Well, I think it's a can of worms because, again, we talked about the mechanics, whether it's the leadership of mechanics, and under Chapter 32, the state controls the pensions, not the town of Nantucket. So then you have to battle with the state. We had the Barnstable Retirement representative come down and look at the cost. And I'm in the federal government. I'm under a different program. I'm more of that diverse program with the 401k and the FERS program, and I fund part of my pension. I voted on the Finance Committee to take no action again this year because I was going to wait for the Wage and Compensation Committee to come in, and then hopefully we were going to allocate some money to have an unbiased opinion on the pensions as far as what it really costs or what it would look like, because now you have to match the Social Security, and like the federal government, they match the 401k. So in the end, is it really a savings to the town? Because I think why the federal government went that way in 1986 was more so to probably save Social Security, not so much to try to save money. So we know the devil we have. We don't know the devil we're going to get. So anyway, I say we wait another year.
Yeah, the way the article has developed, it's developed into a request to town meeting for a home rule petition because the state does control the pension and retirement structure for our employees. But it's meant to be purely an option for new employees. Current employees stay right where they are, nobody loses anything. New employees can join the pension plan that exists today if they choose to do so. No changes there. So no employees are going to be obligated to lose anything. To me, the nice thing about the article and why I support it is that it offers a choice. And I think it's the kind of choice that Nantucket can bring to the state, and it starts a dialogue at the state level which otherwise may not occur. And I think that's going to be helpful for everybody. In the long term, our problem is more in the health insurance issue than it is in the pension plan. Right now, our employees pay a substantial portion of their compensation into the pension plan. So they're very invested, one, whether it's a 401k or the pension. Health insurance is a very different matter, and the outlook for those costs are not good from the community point of view.
Okay, we're right on schedule, and actually there's about a 3-minute buffer built into the schedule, so I'm going to go with one more question because I think it's an important one. And this one will start with you, Adam. Many of you have spoken of the importance of water quality. What will you do to see that the new fertilizer regulations will be enforced?
Yeah, it's important, and we're polluting our waterways, and it's so important to our shellfish industry and just public health. The only way I see to enforce it is to create some sort of enforcement officer who can go out there and check these things, to hold people accountable, to make sure that they're doing these things right, and to make sure that people are certified. Because we require certification, but we have nothing to actually enforce that or to make sure that they're not putting too much chemicals on. Because if we don't do it that way, then we could solve this problem. If we went out there and enforced it and gave some fines and got people in trouble, that would be the way. Enforcement.
Cliff?
I know we've been dealing with this for a couple of years. I think it was 2 years ago, if you drove by this building, we had a seminar or a class about just that, the fertilizer, and I think there was a lot of participation. So I think the community has got involved, and as far as trying to make people do it, that's a whole other story, but I think they've rallied around it, and I think they are in favor of it, and I think we've done a lot for the water quality, whether it's the sewering or the building up the jetties or the fertilizer. So I think we're progressing in the right direction.
Rick?
Well, I think we've got two things going on. One is the question of septic sewer, and we've got a comprehensive wastewater management plan update, and we're going to hear shortly how that plays out and where they recommend sewering. Getting back to the fertilizer issue, my own sense is, 90% of our property owners want to do the right thing. I think we as a town need to help facilitate that, talk to the retailers, make sure the right product is available, information is available to homeowners. But at the same time, and I understand the town is working on a method to redeploy some of our staff during the summer period for periodic checks. And there will be an enforcement mechanism in that regard. But really, the answer is we all enforce it ourselves, so.
Bob?
I believe it's all about education. I mean, I think enforcement officer would be good for spot checks, but I remember I was on SHAB when we wrote the harbor management plan, and we made Nantucket Harbor one of the first no discharge zones in the Northeast. And we actually put dye tablets in holding tanks to make sure nobody was pumping their septic into the harbor. And we went from where it was the norm for everyone to just pump their tanks, their holding tanks, wherever they want, to now we pump more sewerage out of boats and through the pump outs in the marina and the town pier than any harbor in the Northeast. I think on the whole East Coast, actually. Most people want to do the right things. I think 99% of people want to do the right things. And when you educate them that this is bad for the environment, they will do the right thing. Look at recycling. We recycle here. It's automatic. Our kids automatically recycle. Even in places when they go to college and they don't recycle, they still recycle. I think it's just going to be a matter of educating people, the landscapers especially. They don't care if it costs $3 more a bag. They're just going to pass it along. So I think people will do the right thing when taught to do the right thing.
Okay, we're at a point now where we're going to have the closing statements, and I want each candidate to limit their statement to 1 minute, and the dial has rotated to you, Cliff, as the first closing statement.
Thank you so much. I'd just like to thank the Civic League and everybody who's involved, Gino. Like I said, I was born and raised here in Nantucket. I have an 8-year-old son. I don't plan on leaving unless they probably kick me out. I've spent the last, like I said, 4 or 5 years trying to educate myself on the budget and all the capital projects, the future in Nantucket. Hopefully I've taken those experiences and that knowledge along with everything I've learned over the period of the last 50 years of my life, and I can implement it in the best interest of the town of Nantucket. And I look for your vote. Thank you very much.
Yes, sort of, this goes back to the beginning. I've enjoyed serving. I like what I do as a selectman. I think I do a good job, quite frankly. I work hard at it, and I would very much like to continue. I think I've brought a sense of fiscal responsibility and proper financial management. We're doing a much better job in those areas, and I think my continuing on the board helps keep the community on sort of the straight and narrow in that regard. I am committed to making sure that our environment is clean as it can be, and that we have the proper resources to do that. And I do seek your vote. I wouldn't be here running again if I didn't feel I could contribute, and I look forward to everybody voting on the 15th. Thank you.
I'd just like to continue along the path that I've started in the last 3 years, finish out some projects. Water quality, the town infrastructure, as far as plan space needs, are two that stick out to me right now. I grew up in Nantucket, and this is not the small town that we grew up in when I was a kid. There were 2,500 people on this island year-round, and if somebody drove by you and you didn't recognize them, you would turn around and follow them to see where they were going, because you wouldn't know who it was. And you could drive on the beach at jetties and drive all the way around the tip of Coatue, and nobody said a word to you. And now you've got literally 2 miles of beach, if you're lucky, that you can drive on, and we have 10 to 12,000 people here year-round. So this isn't never going to be the little island that we used to know. I mean, those days are gone, unfortunately. And that's the real world, and that's what we have to deal with now, and that's what we have to govern with now. And I would love nothing more to see it go back to that, but it's not going to happen, so we have to work with what we have and make it as much a home as we can. And that's what I'm going to try to do if I get reelected.
Adam?
I think if we're talking about building resiliency and sustainability for a year-round local community, that we need to take back control of some of our basic resources. Housing is an obvious one, renewable energy, and food, community-supported agriculture. I think by taking back control of these basic resources, taking back control of our local economy, by creating more small businesses, that we can really build resilience for this community and that we can last for another couple of generations. And that these systems that are in place don't have to be the systems. We can create new systems, better systems, and all it takes is for 51% of the community to stand up and say, this isn't the way we want it done. We want it done this way. And so my goal as a selectman will be to create that cohesive community voice that can push us forward. Thank you.
Okay, we'll have a 30-second intermission.
Oh, no, I was first, I guess.
Oh, were you first? I'm sorry.
All right, I got it right this time. Okay. All right, I thank you all for sharing your views and answering the questions. We're now going to invite our 3 candidates for the land bank to be seated on the stage. And again, we'll ask each of you to limit your opening statement to 2 minutes, and we're going to change the tags around here.
All right, rotate.
Thank you, Mary.
Facing these toward the camera. Okay, have a seat. Okay, thanks. All right. We're going to have the same format where we begin with opening statements, and we're going to go in alphabetical order. And can we start with you, Jean?
Sure. Is this mic on?
Check to see if it's on. Is the light on?
The light's on. Can you hear me?
Push it a little closer so we can hear it.
Ah, the light's, now can you hear me? All right.
Put it a little closer to you so the TV audience.
How about
can
I
hear.
sit
There you
closer?
go.
How's that?
Good.
Okay. Thank you to the Civic League for this opportunity to speak to the voters and share my thoughts. I'm Jean Miller. I've lived on Nantucket for over 30 years. I use the land bank properties often, and I appreciate how well chosen they are and how well maintained they are. I'm an educator. That's what I do best. I ran the Montessori Children's House for 25 years and then decided to take on some new challenges in my life. I was honored to be a trustee at the Athenaeum for the past 6 years. My responsibilities in that role were to increase donors, and I made it my personal goal to increase local donors by educating them to the needs of the library. I believe those who use the Athenaeum should support the Athenaeum. When my term was up last year, it was announced that year-round donors actually exceeded seasonal donors for the first time, something I was very proud of. I see myself in an educational role at the land bank as well. I would like to bring public awareness to the wonderful properties the land bank has cultivated. Raising funds is not necessary, but raising awareness is. During my campaign, I've asked voters often, have you ever walked the Gardner farm? Have you ever been to the Labyrinth? And most often the answer is no. In collaboration with the Conservation Foundation, the Sconset Trust, the Land Council, and Mass Audubon, so much of Nantucket is preserved as open space. I like the fact that the land bank is creative with the use of their properties, such as the Labyrinth, the new proposed dog park, and the little free library they allowed me to put on my property across the street at Stones Beach. I appreciate what the land bank has created and want to share that with the public, as well as continue to acquire new properties for our residents, seasonal and year-round, to enjoy. When I was the director of the Sconset Trust, we took down the fences and opened Sankaty Head Lighthouse property for the first time in 15 years. The reaction was amazing. People were so enthusiastic to finally get back what they felt they had lost, the opportunity to touch Sankaty Light. I want people to have that same enthusiasm over using the land bank properties, and I'll work to make that happen. Please vote for me as the new face of the land bank. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. And next we'll hear from Bruce Perry.
Good afternoon. Again, I'd like to thank the Civic League for having us here, everybody who came to listen to us, and everybody's going to watch the next couple weeks as this is rebroadcast. My qualifications is I was elected to the Land Bank in 1992 and 1997, and I worked for the Land Bank from 1997 till last November. I've been on the board of Mariah Mitchell Association and the Nantucket Land Council, appointed to the Concom, and have spent my 29 years on Nantucket working on conservation issues and making the land bank properties, in my job, a better place for the public to be, not just for public access, but also environmentally. It also asks for positions. So my feeling is the land bank has done a great job on some issues, but also is coming up short in others. There are a couple of projects that are languishing that would benefit the public. My biggest one is Petrel Landing, downtown next to the boat basin. The land bank paid a lot of money for that property about 10 years ago and has been languishing in the permitting office area for about 5 or 6 years. I'd like to see that project move forward and get the improvements there for the commercial boat owners and for recreational boat owners. In 2007, the land bank did its first set of property maps, so people would come into the office and get a map of properties and where the trails are and some summary of what things we offer. Again, that's 2007, it's a number of years ago. The property map update has been languishing for about a year, 18 months now. I would like to see that to move forward. My Comet Golf Course and My Comet Clubhouse. The clubhouse no doubt needs some improvement. 2 minutes already, okay. It needs some improvement, and that project needs to move forward as quickly as possible. Thank you.
And our final candidate for the land bank seat is John Stackpole.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am John Stackpole, for those who don't know me. I'm a Nantucket native. My family's been here for 200 and some odd years. My father's side. My mother's side's only been here about 85 years, so they were rather newcomers. I attended school on Nantucket. After high school, I went in the Army, worked as a procurement officer and an auditor with the Army. Came back here and worked in the trades for a while. I was with the crew that built the Captain Toby's building that we're watching being renovated now. It's a great job going on down there. And then I went to work for Harbor Fuel Oil Corporation in 1969, and I've been general manager there since 1988. During my time back on Nantucket from the service, I've been on the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board for 15 years, 10 years as chairman. I've been on many committees, peer committees, dredging committees, bulk fuel committee 3 or 4 times, which is still going on. I feel that I've given a lot of time to the island. I've enjoyed it very much. I've enjoyed my 14 years on the land bank. We have a great many projects going on that I'd like to see fulfilled. One is the Petrel Landing, as Bruce mentioned. It is in the permitting stage, and hopefully we'll get going on that and get those permits in pretty soon. We have many other projects going. We are negotiating for several properties that will be a real boon to the island, and I think everybody will be very happy to see that fulfilled. I unfortunately can't talk too much about what's going on negotiation-wise, but rest assured, the land bank is working hard for the island all the time. We have great properties. We have a terrific staff. If it wasn't for the staff, we wouldn't have as good a land bank as we have right now. So I would thank you very much for your past support, and I would ask you for your vote again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. I'll turn now to our panelists for questions, and I'll begin with you, Dan.
Thank you, Peter. As less and less suitable open land becomes available for acquisition, how should the land bank reorient its priorities?
Let's start with Jean, and then we'll rotate, all right?
I think at this point, because so much of Nantucket has been preserved as open space, we need to focus on smaller parcels, mostly beach access and waterfront access, and connector pieces that connect pieces that we already have, for instance, on Washington Street. It's so nice to drive down Washington Street and have a view of our harbor and know that our public funds purchase property so we can have that. So I think the smaller parcels are what we will be looking forward to purchasing.
Bruce?
Yes, Reorienting, again, most of the large parcels have been already acquired by the land bank or the conservation groups. There are a few still out there that are large holes in the donut of our large tracts with other organizations, so we should still continue to try to acquire those. Small tracts are as they become available, that is mostly the limiting factor in what the land bank chooses to acquire. Thinking out of the box, acquiring lots that already have houses on them and removing the houses and giving them away to affordable housing to other people. We've done that in the past. I think we should continue to do that. So the orientation should stay the same. The land bank should buy the best piece of property available at the time with the funds that they have. Thank you.
John?
Thank you. I think the land bank has worked to evaluate each piece of property that we can acquire. In some instances, we don't want to acquire a property because it obviously would be better developed and it really doesn't meet our goals. It doesn't fit in with properties we own already. But we do evaluate them on a property-by-property basis. We try to decide what the best use of that property is, and it may be some open space and some recreational, or it may be all open space or all recreational. But we have to do it on a property-by-property basis, and we can't be hobbled by saying we have to do certain degrees of management on each property without knowing immediately what the property is going to be and what the best use is going to be.
You have any follow-up question, Dan?
No, thank you.
Okay, Elise, you're next.
What is your position on using a land bank property, for example, the Myacomet Golf Course, to hold a major event like the LPGA golf tournament, and in the process likely closing all or part of the course for the better part of 2 weeks?
And we'll start with your response, Bruce.
Well, it's an honor to have a golf course that comes to level of the LPGA. I'm still on the fence of whether or not it's a benefit to the land bank, the members, and the public as a whole. As the question asked, the course will be closed for a couple of weeks before the tournament and probably a week or two after while it's being dismantled. I don't see how that benefits the members or the people who want to play. Again, those are our customers. The island's already full of people. It's not the land bank's job to increase tourism to come to an event. And finally, I don't think the facility is big enough. If you've seen the parking lot out there, it holds 100 cars. There's going to be 100 players plus all their entourages. So I don't know how it's going to work, and I don't see the benefit to the land bank. I'm open to be convinced differently, but there's been no discussion that I know of in the public realm that has addressed those issues.
John?
Thank you. I'm in favor of having the LPGA tournament for a few reasons. Number one, I think it's a great boon to the off-season, to the shoulder season of the island, which is something the Chamber of Commerce and restaurateurs and everybody have been looking forward to for a long time. The course is not going to be closed for 2 weeks. It's going to be more like 6 or 7 days. We're still in the negotiating period, so I can't give out any figures, but it will make some money for the course in a period of 6 days. It would normally take us a year to make. That money can be used toward a clubhouse, which would save money for the land bank, and it would save money for the members to be putting in money. And I think overall would be a great boon to the island.
And finally, Jean.
I would like to see the LBJ tournament come here. I agree with John. I think that it would bring a lot of money into the clubhouse if Richter comes up with the sponsorship he talks about coming up with, and that could help build that clubhouse that their members are so anxious to have be built. I also think that in the shoulder season, we could use an organization like this coming in. We have a lot of houses that people would love to rent. And from the golf tournaments that I've experienced, that's what they do. They rent houses for full weeks. And that's a soft part of our rental market now, renting in September. And the other thing is those young ladies would be great role models to come down here and show our girls on Nantucket High School what you can do with your life. They're strong women, and I'd like to see them come and represent themselves.
Do you have any follow-up questions, Elise?
No, thank you.
Okay, Dan, and the next question from you.
If it is ultimately determined that some portion of the Boy Scout camp could be sold for, all or some portion could be sold for development, should the land bank be prepared to step in and try to buy it even if that means putting aside or postponing another project that is already in the works?
And it's your turn to be first, John.
I very definitely think we should be involved if it becomes available. It's a beautiful piece of property. It's been in the Boy Scouts' hands for decades, generously given by the Civic League. It's a shock, I think, to everybody to find out that it was becoming available and it could be possibly developed. I think it would meet a great need to go into our trail system that exists right now. And to see that developed would be a damn shame.
Yeah, I'd like to see Camp Richard. I think we could work in collaboration with the other conservation organizations. So if it wasn't necessarily the land bank that purchased it, we could work with the Conservation Foundation or possibly the Land Council to make sure that that piece of property stays open space and available to its original mission for the Boy Scout camp.
Bruce?
Part of the fun of being third is that you get to agree with what the previous two people said. I think the land bank should be interested in acquiring that property or assisting. We have a long history of working with other organizations, conservation, private entities, and it should continue in this issue. Of course, we have to worry about what the price is going to be when it becomes available and if the land bank can afford it. And I think we should stay in the discussion. Thanks.
Okay, and you went through, okay.
May I have
And
a
the question
follow-up?
is,
May I have a
do you have
follow-up
a
on that?
follow-up? Yes.
John mentioned the shock of the fact that the property might be available for sale, or in fact that it could be sold, and that the conservation restriction run out. That's the second shock we've had in the last 10 years, the first one being the UMass Boston Field Station. My question of all of you is, should the land bank make an effort to find out, to try and anticipate whether there might be any more of these shocks out there with conservation restrictions of certain types that run out after 30 years that we may not now be aware of?
And Jean, you're up first.
Sure, I think that's probably our obligation to do that. I mean, the large parcels that were out there seem to be taken up, besides the FAA space in Mattakit and the Loran Station in Sconset. But we have to make sure that we are prepared for any other large parcel that might come, whether it's a private parcel now that goes on the market, such as the equestrian pony farm out in Cisco, or something that a deed restriction changes on.
Bruce?
The land bank has a history of doing something similar to that. It spent about 25 years finding the lost titles and owners in Myacomet Park, which is on the east side of Myacomet Pond. So it has a history of title searches and finding owners unknown and acquiring land through that method. And it has the capabilities to do that in this instance. It's a little more difficult to find deed restrictions on titles than it is to track owners unknown, which may sound a little confusing, but I think they should do it.
John?
The short answer is yes. I mean, it's a no-brainer. I think that we have the staff and the capability to do that, and I think that it would behoove us to check that out.
Okay, our next question will be from you, Willis.
The current first-time home buyer exemption is $400,000. Should that be increased, decreased, or is it appropriate given the current real estate market on Nantucket?
And Bruce, you're up first.
The land bank, through its legislation, gets to review that amount every year. I think when it went from 200,000 to 400,000 is appropriate. I think it still is, based on market conditions. And when they review it, we'll see what the situation is. So I think it's appropriate, but it can go up or down as the land bank sees fit.
I agree. We do review it every year. We vote on it. We did increase it at one point, and I think that we look at the real estate values. We talk to the real estate people, and we talk to our staff, who makes us a recommendation. And I think that the way it's been handled is the correct way to handle it.
Jean?
I'm glad to hear that it's reviewed on a yearly basis. I was not aware of that. A lot of voters have brought that issue up to me as I'm running, saying that they think that the current $400,000 is not enough. First-time home owners can't find a house for that amount. So I'm glad that there's flexibility in it, and I would actually like to see the number go up a little bit.
Any follow-up question?
I do, going off what you said, Gene. So does the land bank take the opinion of the voters into strong consideration when determining whether to raise or decrease that amount?
John? Yeah, John starts.
We generally look at the market value of real estate and look at what's been going on in the past and what we expect is going on in the future, and we take the recommendations, and we really haven't put it out to public discussion, but the public is always welcome to our meetings. We listen to the public, and I think that if anybody has a concern, they should come to one of our meetings. Thank you.
I don't know, I'm not on the commission yet, so hopefully when I'm on the commission, I'll be able to make sure that the public is totally aware and gets their voice heard.
I do know that the land bank commissioners do listen to what the public has to say when they see them in the grocery store, at the landfill, or or on the phone. In this instance, I'm sure they listen to them, but there are other factors other than just the people who grab your sleeve. So again, as John said, seeing what the real estate market is and talking to the people in the business is the best indicator of what the real exemption should be.
Okay, we're ready for another question from you, Dan.
You've all heard each other now, a couple of times, responding to different questions, the opening statement. What distinguishes you from the other candidates?
And we'll start with you, Gene.
Oh, me again. What distinguishes me? I'm a fresh face, I'm new. I really believe that in our town government, the paid professionals who are, or the staff of these organizations, they're the consistency, and that's how it should be. And that the board, who is elected by the citizens, should rotate. We all want to do our civic duty, and in order to do that, we need to pony up. So that's actually one of the reasons I ran. Last year, when I went to the polls, I was kind of appalled at how few people were running and how many incumbents were just going to walk into new seats. And I really think it's our civic duty to rotate the citizens on our boards. And so I want to be the new person on that board.
Well, what distinguishes me is that I've taken 17 years to rotate to get back on the board. I think it just, also my environmental background, it distinguishes me from the candidates and from a number of the board members. The Land Bank at its heart is a conservation organization to acquire open space for public use and conservation reasons. And I think that's why I'm running again. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll tell you a little story about how I got on the land bank. Back around, I think it was 2000, I was out picking beach plums one day, and which has been a great thing in my family. I love making beach plum jelly and other things like that from the island goods we have here. I was out beach plumbing, I picked up a bucket, went home to make some jelly. I went back the next day, and the homeowner, who lived a long distance from where I was picking beach plums, had signs out, no trespassing. So I got thinking, boy, this isn't very berry friendly around here today. So about 3 weeks later, a person on the land bank resigned, and I said, boy, I'm going to put my name in and see if I can't do something to preserve some of this land that we enjoy. And that's how I went on, and I continue doing that, and I enjoy it very much, and I would support, and I would wish your support. Thank you.
Okay, next, I don't think there's any follow-up on that, but the next question would be from you, Elise.
How much involvement should the land bank have in efforts to acquire the former FAA property in Matticat and the Coast Guard Lorraine property in Sconset?
And we're going to start with Bruce.
I think the land bank has been involved with both properties and should continue to be involved. Both properties are keystone to first-year access to Matticat and the FAA property, and also with the Loran Tower in Sconset contains a number of rare and endangered plants and habitats, and needs to be protected. So I think the land bank should continue its involvement and be ready to participate.
Once again, I agree. We have been involved. We've been in negotiations with certain entities to be involved. We have a long history of working with other groups, such as the Sconset Trust. Working with them, we saved the Sconset Golf Course. We worked with the Conservation Foundation to save the Norwood Farm property off of Pulpus Road. So we have a history of doing that, And we're going to continue to do that, and those are two very important properties that we are working on.
I mentioned those properties earlier and they are the two large parcels. And I love the fact that the Land Bank and Sconset Trust and Conservation Foundation work so well in collaboration. So I think that's all in place and going forward.
Any follow-up, Elise?
No, thank you.
Okay, Dan, another question from you.
People may disagree with me, not necessarily you, but other people will. But I don't, some would say that the town hasn't done a great deal in managing the open spaces that it has. You look at Mill Hill Park, for example. You look at the Wood property off the Warren's Landing Road, which is in process of being transferred to the land bank, hopefully, at some point. My question is, should it really be sort of part of a general process that any open land that's acquired by the town, rather than by the land bank, be under the supervision of the land bank for property management and basic services?
And we're going to start with John.
Once again, I think we have to look at it property by property. We've been working with the town and Conservation Commission for years to try and manage the Wood property. It's an absolutely beautiful piece of property. It needs to be managed. The town will get great enjoyment out of it. There are other aspects of town properties that we probably should get involved in, but we need to deal with the Board of Selectmen, with the Planning Board to do that. And we have, at the present time, 2,943 acres that we're managing. That's about 250 properties. And every time we add one, it's more cost to us. So we really have to pick and choose. But there are other properties that we are interested in.
I agree that the land bank maintains their properties often way better than the town does. I live across the street from a land bank piece of property and a town piece of property, both on either side. And I would love the town to take care of the properties as well. It's costly. Right now, there are 3 full-time people maintaining the huge amount of land bank property. So it would be a numbers we would be talking about as far as the land bank taking over maintaining some of the town property. So it would come down to numbers, I would think.
Bruce?
I agree with Gene in that the land bank does take great care of its property and its leadership amongst the conservation organizations on the island. It does come down to numbers. There was some talk a few years ago about the land bank taking over all of the town beaches from a management standpoint. The cost to the land bank would have been millions of dollars, and the land bank backed away from that and felt that the town should take care of its own beaches. At the same token, we do already take care of some of the land that the town owns. There's some land out in Smooth Hummocks that the land bank manages, and also at the head of the plains. And so we take care of that for the town, and it's absorbed into our management budget. Thanks.
Any follow-up, Dan? Okay, we have time for one more question from you, Elise.
In your opinion, is the recent revenue stream from real estate transfer fees enough to sustain the land bank and its mission moving forward? If not, what could or should be done to generate more revenue? And if so, how should the money be allocated moving forward as the number of available parcels continues to diminish?
And you're first, Jean.
I'm first again? Wow. I think the 2% is the correct money. I think that in the future, we won't be purchasing as many large parcels, so it's smaller parcels that we're looking for, and it's really about the maintenance going forward. I think the land bank needs to think about not 5 or 10 years from now, but 20 and 30 years from now, and that at that point, acquiring new property won't be necessary, but maintaining it will. So if the real estate market stays strong, the 2% should be fine for that. But I think in the future, they're going to need to look at how to make sure that they've got the money to maintain the properties going forward.
I think the 2% fee structure provides sufficient money for the land bank to fulfill its mission. The problem is it always is chasing the prices. When the land bank has its most money is when real estate costs are the greatest. And when they have the least money, when we could buy more land, is when we have our least fees because real estate values are lowest. So fortunately, the the revenue stream does smooth out the peaks and valleys, and we were able to acquire some properties as prices go down, and then hold our breath and try to keep up with it on the way up. I wouldn't change it. And as a matter of fact, I think the part of conditions of the bonds that the land bank holds requires that the 2% stay the same and not be decreased. So,
John?
I think the revenue stream has been operating well for us. The first of every fiscal year, we have about a $5 million expense just for maintenance, for administrative costs and so on. And monies above that we can use for purchases of property. If we don't have monies above that, then we don't make purchases of property. We have to decide as we're going along what we're going to do with our money. And of course, first and foremost is to take care of our budgets, pay for our staff, pay for our maintenance, and then the extra money will be used for purchases. And I think everything's worked out pretty well, and we're pretty cognizant of what's going on money-wise. Thank you.
All right, it's now time to take questions from the audience, and I'm going to begin with you, Bruce, with the first question. Would you consider development of non-coastal land bank properties for affordable housing purposes? This year is a particularly horrific one for housing here.
The problem with that is that our legislation, that the land bank is geared upon, prohibits that type of use. So the quick answer is no, based on our legislation. However, if the town meeting decided to submit a home rule petition that would exempt some land bank property from that condition, then that's something we'd look at. There's a few, I don't think there's very many properties I would like to see that. I think they do best as open space and benefit the community in that way, and that there's other properties out there, non-land bank, that would be a better choice.
John?
I agree. We're not in the housing business. We do recreation, we do open space. The town is sitting on a lot of acreage that could be developed into housing. Right out the back door, you can see 30 or 40 acres right here. There are other acreages around the island that could be used. I don't think that the land bank has purchased any properties with the eye toward housing, and I don't think that we have any that would really be suitable for that at this time.
Jean?
I have to agree. The land bank is not in the business of building houses. Yes, it's the number one problem on Nantucket right now is housing, and I would like us as a town to see how we can fix that problem. But as Bruce said, the legislature wouldn't allow us as the land bank to use any of our current properties for housing.
Okay, our next question is, and this is going to start with you, John. If elected, will you commit to serve on the Community Preservation Fund? Does that make sense? The word commission is crossed out and the word fund is put in.
I'm not sure what the question means, whether as a land bank commissioner I would serve on the CPC. We have a representative to the CPC. It's a very time-consuming job, as is the Land Bank Commission. And we felt that it would be best for the land bank to appoint somebody to represent us who has the time to do it and also has the knowledge of what is going on with CPC. And we have a very successful person doing that for us. So I'm not sure as I would commit to do that.
Okay, Jean?
I know that each town board has a representative on the CPC. So whether I would be asked to do that, I would think as my first year as a land bank commissioner, I probably would not be. And going further from that, I would consider it, but that's what I would say.
Simply, if the other commissioners offered or to allow me to be on the CPC, I would do it.
Okay, our next question, which I'll begin with Eugene, is what is your position on the acquisition of the, I believe it says 82 or 92 acres FAA property in Mattocket?
I think we touched that a little bit
Yeah.
earlier. Yeah, that, yes, we have to keep our eye on it to make sure that it is hopefully acquired as open space along with, in conjunction with our other conservation organizations. I do believe there's some habitat issues out there as well, so we want to make sure that we're able to do that.
Right. Bruce?
Yeah, as I said earlier, the land bank has been involved with acquiring that parcel, and I think we should still also do it, joining with other groups that have land in the area. And I think would be a critical acquisition for 90 acres that could be split up into 45 lots with 90 houses on it, which would be a crime to see that area built out. Thank you.
We have been working on it. We are interested in it. I think it goes back to the question of water quality, too. At some point in time, we may need to have a sewage facility out there, and it would be a great place for it. I think water quality is a big issue. It was asked and answered at the Board of Selectmen's hearing here earlier, and that area could be used for that, and the land bank would, of course, want to be involved in that and to have some of that area because of the habitat and the species issues.
Okay, Bruce, we'll start with you on this one. The question is, has the use of volunteers to maintain properties been fully tapped?
Yes and no. The land bank tried to use some volunteers a number of years ago through some community service work that some people's probation required to do. It's difficult to wrangle them together if you got jobs to do and oversee them. And plus those people weren't necessarily that motivated to do what they're doing. Volunteers that would be motivated to do a project for land bank or assist land bank would be helpful. Again, it takes a certain amount of time and effort for the staff itself to organize them and keep it going. I think the existing staff does a great job of what it does, but help is always accepted.
I think the big issue with the volunteer work is liability. In this litigious society we live in, if anybody ever got hurt, we'd be in a lot of problems. And also it does take away from our staff doing their job. So it hasn't worked too well in the past, and I'm not so sure we would look at it in the future, although any type of volunteer program would always be looked at.
Jean?
I'm not aware of any volunteers being used for the land bank right now at all. My number one goal in being on the land bank is making the public more aware of the land bank properties. I don't think they're utilized as much as they could be, and I do think volunteers in that instance is just getting people out there and showing them where the properties are could be very advantageous.
Okay, I'm down to my last question, folks, so if you have any more, submit them now. And this question is addressed specifically to you, Bruce. It said, why did you resign from the land bank?
Everybody's gonna get a shot at that?
No, just you.
Yeah, I did resign from the land bank last November. My resignation letter is part of the public record if anybody wants to see it. I had a disagreement with the director and some of the staff, and as a matter of principle, I resigned. I can't go into any more detail at the moment, but it was a personal decision, and that's why I did it.
Okay, we are a bit ahead of schedule, and it's time for our closing statements, and I think that you're up now, John, first.
Okay. Once again, thank you all for being here. The land bank is involved in a lot of projects right now, some that are very dear to my heart. I've been on there 14 years. I'd like to continue being on there. I think that I've got a good handle on what's going on with the land bank. And one of the things I forgot to mention when we were talking about volunteers, there is a big volunteer group called the Commissioners. We put in a lot of time and a lot of interest, and we are volunteers. Thank you.
Jean?
I can bring fresh ideas and greater awareness to the land bank. At the Sconset Trust, I learned about acquisition as well as about good stewardship of public property. On an island where residents or visitors often feel their wallet is bleeding, it's nice to find activities that are free of cost. The land bank offers that with some of the most beautiful walking trails, beach access, and public fields. As a world-class resort, it's unimaginable that residents or guests could not play golf here unless they belong to a private club. The land bank provides not one, but two public options. I want to see the future of the land bank be about how we, the public, can benefit from the properties our land bank taxes have purchased. With most of the largest parcels of land off the market, it'll take keen eyes to decide how to best purchase property going forward. I would like to be a part of that process. I ask for your vote on April 15th. Thank you.
Yes, again, thank everybody for either being here or watching this on TV channels. I think it brings the land bank experience in all aspects of the land bank, whether it's working on the properties and or acquiring and land or repairing the land. One issue that hasn't come up tonight is the gun club. I know it's tangential. The land bank owns property on 2.5 sides of the gun club. The gun club has been looking for somebody to hold his conservation restrictions so they can move forward and get their permits from the state. I think the land bank, as a abutter who is managing the property all around it, would be an excellent partner to hold a conservation restriction. Whether you're in favor of guns or not, I think that's for another avenue, but I think the land bank should hold a conservation restriction. The land bank should also be a leader in the, has been and should continue to be a leader in the community and set an example for other organizations to follow. Thank you.
Thank you, and I want to thank the panel and our questioners and you all for joining us today. We're now at the final tag-end portion of our meeting where we can invite the HDC's new non-incumbent members, and I anticipate that Raymond Pohl is in the audience. Okay, would you come up and join us? And we'd like to hear 2 minutes from you by way of self-introduction. Okay. And you can put that right in front of you. Okay. And take a seat right in the center. Have a seat right here.
I wish I had somebody to spar with up here. My name's Ray Pohl. I've been living on Nantucket for the last 24 years with my family. You want to spar, Kevin? What?
Get your mic in.
Oh, sorry. Okay, we'll start again. My name's Ray Pohl. I've been living on Nantucket for the last 24 years with my family. 20 years ago, this April 1st, my wife is Lisa Botticelli, opened our architecture firm of Botticelli and Pohl. And I've spent the last 26 years dealing with the HDC on a weekly or now approximately a bi-weekly basis, presenting my projects to them and, you know, going through the whole process. And it just occurred to me, David Barham, as you may know, is vacating his seat and there's an empty seat, so I'm essentially running unopposed. But I just thought that it would be interesting to see how things worked on the other side of the table. And, you know, it's going to mean a few sort of inconveniences for my office because I'm actively practicing. So I think the biggest sort of concern that we have is that my wife will now be representing all of our projects, all the Botticelli and Pohl projects. But I will be on the other side of the table, and I look forward to doing it.
Thank you very much. And that concludes.
And thanks for coming by, everyone.
Yeah, that concludes our proceedings, and thank you for joining us. And be sure to tell your friends that if they missed today's meeting, that this will be rebroadcast repeatedly up until the election. Thank you.
And Peter, there are also interviews with all these candidates in both the Inquirer and Mirror and on Geno TV, which people might like to watch.
Geno TV will be carrying the interviews, and be sure to check the INM. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Why don't you ask him? I asked him who he was going to vote for. He wouldn't tell me. Maybe I'll tell you.
Thank you. Yeah, we're right on schedule. You know, usually it's